Hello. So I think we can start already, and if other people join, maybe they will do it during my introduction before the actual substantive presentation. So that should be all right. We are very happy to see great interest in this webinar and great participation. So I will just briefly introduce the webinar project, and then we will have two presentations on the substance of our findings. And then we will also open the floor to comments and questions from the audience. And also, we will keep an eye on the chat as well. So a few introductory words. We're here to speak of the fact-finding mission on media freedoms in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which took place in October last year, 2023. And this mission and the activities around the mission have been conducted within the Media Freedom Rapid Response Project with funding received from the European Commission, and a number of press organizations, free speech organizations, and members of the coalition. The project tracks, monitors, and responds to the situation of the media freedom in both EU member states and candidate member states, and provides support to the media, to the civil society, including through public advocacy. During the mission, which took place both in Banja Luka and Sarajevo, we met with the government authorities of various levels. We also met with journalists, the media community, NGOs, lawyers, and the international community present in the country. And the mission focused on several areas of media freedom issues, including problematic legislative initiatives, for example, the recriminalization of defamation in Republika Srpska, the safety of journalists, and also the situation of the public broadcaster in the country. Following the mission, we have published a statement, delivered a press conference, and we also prepared a report, which has now been shared with public. And the mission confirmed an overall sense of a difficult climate for media in the country, which is confronted by problematic legislative initiatives and also hostile attitude of the authorities, harassment, in particular in Republika Srpska, but not only in other parts of the country as well, and also a number of socio-economic issues. Finally, I will just say one more thing, that I think it's important to see the situation in Bosnia in the larger context of the EU enlargement process, and namely the progress reports that has been prepared by the EU Commission in November last year noted many concerns that are echoing our findings and our recommendations that we made in our report. With no further ado, I'd like to pass the floor to Frane Maroevic, the Executive Director of the International Press Institute. And if I may, the question to you, Frane, would be to outline the findings of the mission about the legislative and larger institutional environment for the media freedom in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Over to you.
Thank you, Maxime, and it's great to have so many of participants here with us, and I'm glad to be at least virtually back in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It was a wonderful opportunity to visit together with the mission in October, and maybe to pick up on the element that you finished at the end, Maxime, the EU progress and EU path. Just wanted to highlight that Bosnia had a very important and very interesting high-level visit the other day from the EU President von der Leyen, together with Prime Ministers Rutte and Plenković, where they underlined their support for Bosnia and Herzegovina's EU path. But one of the things is that I think which is clear is that this path and this progress will need further improvement on the level of media freedom and freedom of expression. And one of the criteria that's outlined by the EU for the progress on the negotiation is for the country to guarantee freedom of expression and freedom of the media, including the protection of journalists, judicial follow-up of the cases, of the violence against media workers, and to ensure the financial sustainability of the public broadcasting system. And those are the two elements that Maja will focus on. But as you said, I would like to focus on the legal framework. And to start off with that, Bosnia and Herzegovina started off and has had at least one of the most progressive legal frameworks in the region and in Europe. And this was pretty much done under the international guidance. Some of the best European practices were adopted. And to quick an example, the Communications Regulatory Agency of Bosnia and Herzegovina used to be a model for regulatory institutions in the region, but also it was more progressive than many similar institutions in Europe. And you know, in the post-war environment, it successfully regulated inflammatory hate speech. It was one of the first converged regulatory bodies which combined telecommunications and broadcasting. And as our report points out, today, communications regulatory agencies is undermined by politicized developments with appointments of the director. The management council has not been reappointed now since 2017. No new members of the board have been appointed. So this agency, which used to be a shining example of something which is functioning, which is progressive, which is moving forward, is now in a terrible financial but also management situation, as our reports points out. Again, in 2001, Bosnia and Herzegovina was the first country in the region to decriminalize defamation. Again, a very positive, a progressive step in line with not just European, but best international practices. And this was overturned last year by the government of Republika Srpska, where the National Assembly voted to make defamation a criminal offense with financial penalties. And while it was positive that in the process they took out the penalties of going to jail, but if you don't pay the fine, as they say, you will serve the time. So while it's not explicitly in the law, the fact is that if you are convicted, you can also end up going to jail for this. The second problem, and it is probably much more problematic here, is that criminalization puts the issue of regulating speech under the control of the prosecution, which can decide which cases to pursue or not. So it can become a tool for restricting freedom of expression, and it's also a chilling factor that you may be prosecuted or investigated by the police or the prosecutor. This aspect of criminalizing defamation, it's not just limited to Republika Srpska. While the law is there is a cross-border component, because if a criminal case is pursued by somebody who may not be on the territory of the Republika Srpska, there is nothing stopping the authorities from issuing, for example, an international arrest warrant for somebody who they convict. So this is something that can be used in a cross-border sense as well. So this is something that we in our report are highlighting, which is a huge problem, and this is something that everybody who we spoke to has highlighted. But it's also just the start of some of the problems, and it's part of I think this is part of a bigger package of the laws that we saw in Republika Srpska. And one of the next part of the package is the draft law on non-governmental organizations, which is closely modeled on the so-called Russian foreign agents legislation, which we saw how this was clearly weaponized against the media there and in other countries. It's not as draconian as the one in Russia, but a light version of this law can still be used to place very huge administrative burdens and to regulate the media, which many of them are by default registered as non-profit organizations, because many media don't make a profit. So it's a way of registering. We also heard during our mission there that there is a pending proposal for a new media law in Republika Srpska, which amongst other things will probably determine who is media and who is not. And this is a very dangerous, in a way, thing for for authorities to regulate. Media are by default do not need to be regulated in that way. Many, today it's very difficult to determine who is a journalist. Many people who might not be registered as journalists are also involved in journalism. So this could be a way of also regulating this space, which would be problematic. But the bigger problem that we saw there and that I see is that this law is being developed in secret, in complete secrecy, without consulting the broader media community or the public. And it's clear, if you're trying to regulate a public space, if you're trying to regulate the media need to be part of the process, and public needs to be part of this process. So this is, we see as a very worrying development and a problematic package of legislation in Republika Srpska. But this is not all, unfortunately. We also noted during our mission a new draft regulation on the level of Sarajevo Canton, which foresees penalization of dissemination of so-called fake news. And even though there has been a very strong backlash by the civil society about this law, it has not actually been withdrawn. And the danger here is that who decides what is false and what is true? For example, if somebody is being accused of doing something illegal or corruption, quite often what you hear is the reply is, this is fake news, and we can think of many politicians who respond to that. So you can imagine how this law can be used to regulate media and free speech. And the second point is such regulation could easily go beyond the Sarajevo canton. It could be a bad example for other parts of the country as well. And then the last piece of legislation that is very problematic, that we would like to be reversed, is the recently adopted amendments to law on freedom of access to information at the state level, which will actually reduce access to information by providing more exceptions for the states not to disclose information on issues of public interest. And there is also the problem that there is a lack of an independent appeal mechanism, and the new law prioritizes protection of so-called privacy rather than public interest. And what I have to highlight here is, while we are all private individuals, but at the end of the day, if you are working in a high-level public office, if you're managing public funds, you have an obligation to disclose this to the public whose money you are actually managing. So dismantling the barriers to access to information is essential for expanding the possibilities of journalists to write about issues of public interest and perform their role as a public watchdog in a democratic society. So these legal developments that I've noted will have, and already have, a negative effect on journalism and media freedom in the whole country, and send, I think, a very strong and clear message that investigating journalism and dissent are not welcome. Many of these steps have been criticized and condemned by the international community. And we appeal in our report to the institutions of Bosnia and Herzegovina to repeal the problematic laws, starting with the law on recriminalization of defamation and foreign agents, as well as the governments should not be involved in regulating so-called fake news, and they should be more open and transparent about the public money that they are spending on your behalf. We also realize that many of these areas do need to be regulated. So we are not saying that you shouldn't regulate these areas at all, but you have to regulate them in such a way that protects human rights and protects free speech, and therefore the media and the civil society need to be involved in these processes. And we also have in our report a set of recommendations to the international community. And I think one of the key recommendations, coming back to the beginning and the EU focus of the country, is that strong focus on media freedom has to be an essential for the country as it moves forward, because it's a key component of democracy and the rule of law. So these are the highlights that we have in our report when it comes to legal matters, and Maja will talk more about other elements of the law, but I'll hand it back to Maxime first.
Yes, thank you very much, Frane, for this presentation. And I do invite the participants and everyone who is interested to read more about the details of this legislation and our recommendation in the report, which is fairly detailed on the specifics of applying international standards and European standards, and justifying our critique as to these problematic initiatives. With no further ado, I will pass the floor now to Maja Sever, who is the president of the European Federation of Journalists. And I would like to ask you, Maja, if you could tell us what are the major concerns with regards to the safety of journalists, the situation of the public broadcaster in the country, and what actions should actually be taken to improve the situation with this issue. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad that we all here. I just want to emphasize that our mission was composed by other international organizations as Article 19 Europe, Free Press Unlimited. You met already Frane from International Press Institute. Then Observatorio Balkani Trans-Europa, as well as Southeast Europe Media Organization, CIMO, and of course was supported by the Journalist Association, BH Journalists. And I saw on a list of participants that most of colleagues who were in a mission are here with us, so be free to comment and even to answer on some questions if you think that you should. Well, let's start with the important topics. Unfortunately, safety of journalists in Bosnia and Herzegovina is negatively affected by a complexity of governance and politics of the country, which continues to deal with the challenging legacy of the war. The legacy of impunity for crimes against journalists is concerning. Many journalists, particularly those working in Republika Srpska, do not feel protected when doing their work and do not trust the police for protection. One of the journalists in Republika Srpska stated that government will not stop before the cripples all journalists and media, and they will not refrain from using any resource against journalists. The only thing that matters to them is to silence us, said journalists in Republika Srpska. In 2022, 31 attacks on journalists were registered by the regional network organization Save Journalists. 29 were classified as threats and pressure, and 2 were physically attacked. This amounts to an increase of 40% of attacks to 2021. A large proportion of the verbal attacks occurred online on social media platforms, and many concerns female journalists. The trend in 2023 continues and to be problematic. By June, Save Journalists platform recorded a total of 15 attacks and threats to journalists. The number of physically attacks on journalists increased slightly compared to previous years. Of particular concern were attacks conducted in Banja Luka in March during the attempts at organizing the LGBT march. 2 journalists and 1 activist were attacked by a group of hooligans. The police were unable to provide protections while the journalists were attacked. Another example, in Mostar, the owner of web portal Herzegovina Info, Marija Ćosić, in 2 occasions in the span of 2 months, had the 4 tires on her car slashed. Another example, in northern district of Brčko, the owner of web portal Times Ba, Mirza Dervišević, who has been denouncing criminal activities in Brčko, suffered a serious physically attack by unknown person. These trends send a warning signal. It is even more concerning that only 25% of those cases have been investigated, according to the BiH Journalists Association. Prosecution rates are comparably low, contributing to the climate of impunity for attacks of journalists. Mission stakeholders all emphasize the lack of appropriate institutional follow-up to threats against journalists as an issue. Politicians in BiH very rarely condemned attacks and threats on journalists and media houses. On contrary, politicians themselves are often directly responsible for threatening and pressuring journalists. For example, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Konakovic, explicitly signed out a journalist during an interview and accused him of fabricating stories. On the same day, the president of Republika Srpska, Milorad Dodik, openly attacked the journalist of the local television station, BNTV, in a public conference. In a recent episode, a journalist working for N1 Televizija, Snježana Mitrović, asked President Dodik about his connections with number of persons arrested by police in drug trafficking operation. Dodik reacted violently and accused her and N1 Televizija of trying to destroy Republika Srpska. He later called the journalist on the phone and continued to insult and curse her, stating that he was unhappy how N1 had reported about this episode. As reported in the West Balkans Journalist Safety Index to date, no single politician has been sanctioned because of their verbal attacks, threats, or pressure against journalists and media. The impunity of politicians for their assaults on journalists is therefore a constant trend in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This impunity, together with ongoing hostility towards journalists, sends a worrying signal that journalists are legitimate target of violence. The Journalists Association keep encouraging journalists and other media professionals to use the free media help line tools, especially the free services of network of lawyers working for the helpline. From the beginning of 2023, there are 36 cases of verbal violence, threats online, and misogynic insults against female journalists. It remains essential that civil society organizations, key local institutions, including the Human Rights Ombudsman, and international organizations work with the media workers to improve position and protections of journalists in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In Canton Sarajevo, the public prosecutor's office was the first who recognized attacks on journalists as a priority and appointment contact person for Journalist Association. Besides Canton Sarajevo, the establishment of contact points within other police and prosecutors' officers in occurring in a few other cantons. The missions was also told by Republika Srpska authorities that similar contact point has been established in the entity. Those and creations of National Registry of Attacks on Journalists are to be considered as positive steps. A proposed National Working Group for Safety of Journalists, which would bring together national and entity-level police, prosecutors, journalist associations, and other to track cases, has yet to be established. Similarly, there are some proposed amendments to the criminal code to grant better protection to journalists. Authorities in the Federation remain largely open to the idea, but the potential cooperation runs contrary on the current political agenda in Republika Srpska. So such amendments have not yet been adopted. Well, let's continue with a few sentences about national public broadcaster, Radio Televizija Bosne i Hercegovine, which remains locked in period of crisis and on brink of collapse. The main reason for this economic uncertainty within BiH is still the deliberate withholding of subscriptions money by the regional public broadcaster of Republika Srpska. This denial of statutory funding continues to be denied nationally broadcaster of now more than 41 million euros in much needed resources. As a result, social pension and health insurance and the taxes on salaries have gone unpaid for a long period, 8 years. Psychological pressure on its all overworked staff, and many have quit to find job elsewhere. Those who remain face stress and chronic challenges regarding preparation and productions of reports. The wages are shamefully low. 60% of workers in BHRT earn 400 euros or less every month. This pressure severely undermining BHRT's institutional stability and independence. If the broadcaster were to collapse, Bosnia and Herzegovina would be left as only EU candidate country without functional public broadcaster. In Republika Srpska, entity meanwhile, major political pressure and interference at RTRS continue and the broadcaster lack editorial independence. The main source of these pressures come from the ruling Serbian Independent Party. And there are politicized appointments to the broadcaster oversight bodies. Incidents of censorship are reported to be common. Editorial independence is weak. The beginning of 2024 brought new problems to BHRT. This public broadcaster is officially left without any financing since January 1st, because RTV tax is no longer included in the electricity bills in Federacija BiH entity. The shutdown of BHRT is more certain than ever, unless some urgent steps are made by ruling parties and political authorities. The workers are already owed one part of the salary, and the next one is very likely not to be received. They are still working normally, but in difficult conditions because there is no money even for basic production needs. The BHRT Workers' Union called on prosecutor's office and the financial inspections to investigate all three public broadcasters and determine a responsibility for the illegal retentions and spending the citizens' money, which by law had to belong to BHRT. The union also demanding solutions that would ensure the political and financial independence of the country public service. Almost a month has passed since BHRT has been without any source of funding, and the politicians have still not agreed of any solutions. The Parliamentary Commission proposed temporary financial assistance to BHRT from budget reserves until the permanent solutions is found. The workers also mentioned the possibility, and union also mentioned the possibility of a general strike if they are not paid for their works. Agreements between ruling party regarding BHRT and public media service in general are ongoing right now. The position of BiH Journalist Association is that, and the union, is that protecting public media service, its independence agreements and financial model should be not part of any political trade between ruling parties. The BHRT union must be invited to consultations on any solution for public media service in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's it for now.
Thank you very much, Maja, for outlining these issues, and they are also described in the report. So again, I encourage the audience to consult the report, and thank you, Maja, for also following up and making additional comments on the developments since we prepared the report and since the report was conceptualized. I invite everyone now to the discussion to make your contributions, to make your comments, to ask questions. I will also say that you can ask questions or make comments in the local language, because our panelists, Frane and Maja, would be happy to answer in that language. I do see one comment in the chat already, maybe more of a comment than a question. So I will not read the entire comment, but basically to point out that the comment welcomes the report and says that there are issues with the lack of media lawyers and journalists' protections. And also the comment makes raises certain concerns about the existing journalist associations and disconnect with the journalists in the country. And there is also a link to the book. And I see that Borka has also replied to this comment and made her own question. But maybe before we proceed to that, I see that Frane wants to reply to that. Please, Frane.
Sure, I know Nijara well, who made the comment, and just to highlight that Nijara herself was attacked and targeted and threatened for her amazing reporting, especially on the migrant crisis in the region. So I know that she has been the target of these attacks, and it's one of the cases that that is not being properly followed up, is not being properly investigated, which Maja was talking about. So I think this is an important element, that we have somebody here with us who has been the target of this. And yes, I can understand her frustration that not enough is being done in order to ensure that these attacks are properly investigated, but also I think not enough is being done in sense that these attacks should not take place, and the authorities must take this seriously, which was important. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yes, Maja, please.
Maybe I can shortly answer a few questions I see from Rubina and Pehar, and that's what I saw. First of all, I have to say that we are constantly in contact with the colleagues in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Association is a member of European Federation of Journalists. I can even say that daily we are and I am in contact with the Borka, Neda, Vanja, and other colleagues in BiH. Regarding to public media service, right now we are preparing some concrete specific activities with the help of colleagues from BiH TV, RT. We had a meeting with our expert groups for broadcasters, BREG. We will have for a few days a steering committee of EFJ, and we will try really to propose some concrete campaign actions, lobbying influence. Of course, it's not just announcements and open letters, but we will try to work with the people in the field and to try to form some group of people who will really take some concrete actions. And I have to say that we really work on it.
And maybe just to add to what Maja was saying, I mean, to put it even shorter and more simply, I think what it is that we need to keep pushing to answer Pehar's and Rubina's question is we need to keep the focus on the media freedom, and this is why our report, the recommendations are not just to the authorities of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we know that this is going to be difficult, but also we heard again and again during our visit the important role of the international community still has in the country. And this is important also responsibility that the international community has in the country to keep also pushing, because it is about media freedom and freedom of expression are essential to all the other things as well that are being demanded. So if you're talking about the rule of law, who is investigating corruption? Who is writing about crimes? It is journalists. If you are talking about democratic institutions, again, it's media and the journalists that are providing an important watchdog forum there role. So there needs to be a stronger understanding that journalists and media play a key essential role in all the reforms that the country still needs to do.
Thank you very much, Maja and Frane. I think this is an answer.
Please,
Yes.
if I can just add something.
Of course.
My colleague Massimo remind me that people are asking for concrete support, and maybe it's worth it to mention of support of European Center Pluralism, Media Freedom. You can visit, I will share it in the chat, their websites. There is some concrete legal and other supports. Our colleague Flutura yesterday published that new legal support budget is allowed, and so I will share it. I will share the link to organization in a chat, so you can follow and read it. And there is some concrete support for journalists, media outlets facing legal actions in Europe, lawsuits, detentions, slaps, and etc., etc. So from our organization, there is existing already concrete help for journalists and media organization, which is in need. So I will share it in the chat.
Maja, you have a question also, I think, from Jelena Petkovic, but if you want to, I can also reply to it. Up to you.
You can start, so then I can add if
yes, maybe just to say to the participants, because not everyone sees the questions in the chat. This is to hosts and panelists. So the question is, what are the reactions of the international community to the problems that are pointed out in the report, to the problems that the journalists face? So please, Frane or Maja, what are your takes on this question?
I can start, and essentially I think we have a common understanding of what the issues and the problems are. I don't think we heard at any point anybody saying, no, this is absolutely wrong or incorrect. All the institutions, all the ambassadors, heads of missions that we met with and visited agreed with the conclusions and the findings that we've come up with. And you will see them actually. I mean, the most obvious example is that the EU in its progress report, in its analysis of the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, is talking about the same issues that we are talking about the safety of journalists, about the legal problems that I was outlining, about the need for strong and independent public broadcasting systems. I think what is maybe the difference is that we are there, and this is our job and this is our role, is to keep demanding that this should be put at the top of the political agenda. So when everything is being discussed, and I know there are so many political priorities, economic priorities, but what I'm trying to highlight is, I think the difference is that we understand and see these problems as an integral component of politics, of economy, of democracy, of the rule of law. So it should be at the top.
I won't be so diplomatic as Frane, because I'm just a journalist, but I will say that, to be honest, sometimes the representatives of international community seem powerless to me, I have to admit. But of course, we are not giving up. We demand, as Frane said, we ask them, and we really demand that they must make media pluralism, freedom of media as a priority. But that's my point of view. But I think that, Frane, you share it with me also.
I share it with you. I just don't accept that they're powerless.
No, but yeah, they are not powerless, but like they pretend they are powerless. Let's say it like this. Sometimes.
Great. There is also a question from Worka in the local language. So if I cannot help with this, so if Maja or Frane, you could maybe answer in the same language, that would be good to this question.
Okay, the question is, I'll quickly translate. What's the next step following this report? How we can turn this recommendation into practice, and what can we do to make this part of the strategy of all the actors in Bosnia and Herzegovina? I mean, this is what requires work from now on. Essentially, as Borka says, is how do we translate these recommendations into concrete steps and actions? And I think for me, it's a little bit of what I was already talking about, is about ensuring that they become high on the political agenda and political priorities, because what I've seen in the past is quite often it gets pushed down the agenda because, you know, there are other important things. And what I'm saying is that these issues of media freedom are part of every key and important things. And this is why it's for us as civil society, as activists, to keep putting them back on the agenda. That would be my reply to this, but maybe Maja once more. And just to highlight, we have another question in somebody used the actual Q&A function.
Yes, and I'm totally lost in these questions all around. Now I just try to read what is in this QA. Just a second.
No, I can read it for everyone in case not everyone sees it.
Please.
So basically, there are two questions. So maybe we'll take them one by one. So the first question is, what is the cooperation among various civic actors domestically to counter the challenges that have been outlined? As those are the challenges for NGOs, but also others. Maja, would you like to answer this question?
Well, it seems to me that cooperations and between those organizations are good. And as I know, the civil actors in Bosnia and Herzegovina are supported, and I don't know, we cooperate with them a lot, and with NGOs and others. On the second questions about support that we need from international of regional civic actors, well, I don't know, Frane, please help me. It seems to me that we really, and this mission shows that we, the biggest international organizations for journalists and human rights defenders really cooperating, and it's showed in this mission and some other missions, but I don't know what we need else. So Frane, please help me.
I think, I mean, as you said, we have great cooperation, and this is one of the things that I would like to highlight. This project is extremely useful, which brings us all together in a very structured way to work together as organizations, but also as individuals. So I don't think we need more cooperation and coordination. I think what we probably need is, and this links to the question I wanted to highlight from Maja Jerkovic in the chat as well, because she's also asking how can journalists from Bosnia and Herzegovina help us to help? And this is, I think, what is missing. I find also, it's not just Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also internationally, journalists are quite often shy to talk about problems faced by journalists. They're not keen to report about problems, threats, pressures faced by their colleague. There's somehow this feeling of, oh no, we shouldn't be talking about ourselves. And while I can understand that, I would be hesitant to agree to it, because I think we have to talk about this, and this is how journalists can help, is to talk about the issues and the problems in a general scope, and how these, coming back to my point, is how these threats against journalists are taking apart our democracies, how they're taking apart the institutions that are there in order to protect us as citizens and our state institutions. So please don't be shy, don't be afraid to talk about these problems, because more we talk about them, better it is for the whole atmosphere. And I think problems when they become public, in a way, they're much easier to tackle and deal with. I think when we talk about these issues, these are public attacks on journalism, so the response also needs to be public. So to reply to Maja, it's not just about reporting the cases to us, but it's also helping us disseminate these messages.
Yeah, please, if I can, Max, add, just because this is a great question for me, because I think that organizing journalists in solidarity is extremely important, and this is a just question about it. Maja said that she's interested what journalists from BiH can help, and is it enough to report cases, provide support for those who are targeted, how to bring these topics closer to the public, because we often, Maja said, have no understanding or support even from ordinary citizens. And that's exactly why we are here. Yes, you have to report to us, you have to cooperate with us, organize yourself, because as we are together, we are stronger. And sometimes we can be your voice. And that's the purpose of, and that's the aim of our work. So that's why we want to work with the members on the field, and we work daily with the members of the field, because we can be your voice, we can try to help you, to support you, but also to spread the voice and the information about situation in which you are. And together, as I mentioned, when I'm talking about BiH TV, that we are planning some even European campaign. It's also very important to spread the information and about a situation all around European Union, and we are in position that we can do it. So organize yourself, join some, I don't know, group, association, union, connect with the other organization as International Press Institute, EFJ, and we will help you. Not just with some legal, finance, and other support, but with real solidarity, to show your problems, to talk about it, to try to connect you with the people who can help you. So answer on your question is that's why we are here, and that's why the mission was in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and hope that will come soon.
And just to follow up, I mean, we have a wonderful comment from Rubina here, is if she's asking if we can publish a statement, a press release on the recommendations and offer it for signature to other organizations that might have not been part of the mission, but who are also supporting this. I like this idea very much in terms of, you know, as Maja said, it's about solidarity. It's about showing that it's not just the few journalists who are threatened or attacked, but it's all of us together who believe in this. So I very much support this suggestion by Rubina. Thank you.
And maybe when we talk about, sorry, Max.
Yeah, just to say that, that there was also a comment from Borka, and if I understand it correctly,
I just want to,
it is on the number of cases of defamation already that started in the country, and the you know, the commitment that we heard from the authorities, from the National Assembly in Republika Srpska, to make an assessment on how the new legislation actually affects journalists. But yes, please, Maja.
Yeah, I just want to comment Borka's message when we talk about sharing information in solidarity. And Borka, I will translate, will be interesting also for, I think, all participants. Borka just texted that it's important to share. At the moment, there are 45 criminal charges for defamation. 5 are against journalists and 32 against ordinary citizens. And Borka said that it's a really large number of charges, and it's worth some even truth. They still do not have a single defendant. So that's what Borka said. And also, just a second. Borka asked if will Media Freedom Rapid Response accept the invitation of a Speaker of the National Assembly of Republika Srpska to participate in the analysis of the application of criminal defamation and the impact of criminal code of the Republika Srpska on freedom of expression in RS and whole Bosnia and Herzegovina. I think that we will.
Yes, and now there is also a question or comment rather from Selma, who's saying that it would be difficult to get to Dodik, who is the addressee of many of the recommendations and concerns that are made in the report. Would maybe, Frane, would you like to comment on this?
I mean, we also talked about it during the mission. We offered and we asked and requested a meeting with Milorad Dodik, and we were not granted this meeting, so he did not want to meet us. So I agree with Selma that he can choose to ignore us, but I think the point is that it should be not just about one person, it's about the society, and there has to be a better understanding in the society that it's about their own freedoms which are also being eroded by this legislation. It's not just freedoms of the journalists. When you talk about criminalization of defamation in Republika Srpska, as Borka put in the comment, 32 cases were raised against citizens. So it's citizens who are being affected by this. When we talk about the law on freedom of access to information, while the citizens might not be the ones who are using this law at most, it's usually journalists who, it is public access to information for all, it's not just for journalists. And this is about reporting on people who are running institutions on behalf of citizens and who are spending money on behalf of citizens. So this is what we are trying to also raise a bigger public understanding and a profile why these things matter to everybody, not just journalists.
And now we also have a comment from Massimo, who is also part of the mission, who is pointing out that many of the problems are regional in nature and common to other countries in the Balkans. And it is definitely something that we have noted in our discussions, and in the report we also make many comments that, you know, many draconian legislative initiatives have been replicated from other countries, and that is unfortunately a very problematic tendency, and it has to be addressed indeed with, you know, cooperation between civil societies in different countries and journalists across the borders.
Fully agree with that, and just if I can add, I mentioned a few times in my report Safety for Journalists platform. It's a very good example of cooperation, few countries in the region. Also, I have to say that we share another big problem. We just mentioned it in our report, but lack of protecting of workers' rights and negotiation processes and such things. And we already made some steps in cooperation on those issues between countries in the region. So yeah, Massimo, I fully agree with you. Regional cooperation is definitely something would be very helpful and welcome.
I would just like to say, just one thing to say, that we have like 3 minutes left. So maybe if there are questions specifically rather than general comments, we could take maybe 1 or 2 more questions. But do, you know, use the Q&A function or the chat, and I will be happy to facilitate. But please, Frane, sorry to cut you off.
No, I mean, just to come back to the point about regional, but also global issues and global solidarity. One of the things that my organization, the International Press Institute, is doing this year is we are organizing our global congress in Sarajevo at the end of May, 22 to 24th of May, where we are going to bring the global journalism community to Bosnia and Herzegovina to talk about some of the problems that we are all facing as journalists around the globe, but also to put a focus on the country and the region and put them on the map. So please also put those dates in your calendar and join us there. But I see that somebody has raised their hand in the participants. I don't know how that works in the webinar mode.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you can unmute yourself, or maybe I'll try to unmute you. Can you unmute yourself and speak? If not, I'll ask our technical support.
Špela, unmute se, pa samo govori. Okay, it's accidentally. Špela didn't want to speak. Okay.
Oh, it's
okay, Špela.
All right. Well, if there are no questions, maybe just to say that we would be happy for support with, the use of the report also in your daily activities, in your advocacy, in your communication with the authorities. I see that in the chat there were already, cooperation being made, asking for a statement and signatures to be shared with other organizations, and work quickly jumping on that and answering yes. So I think it's great that, even this small webinar is becoming a platform where we can cooperate on these issues. And I do encourage you to reach out to us, to make your suggestions. I hope this webinar was useful. I hope it will actually be used. The findings of the report will actually find their addressees, the authorities, the international community in Bosnia. And it is only together, I think, with the domestic actors, with the international actors, that we can make any sizable impact, any tangible impact for these issues. And I do see that there is one more comment in the chat, which is basically echoing the reporting, how reporting is important, and solidarity between organizations is important to put pressure on the perpetrators, and commending local organizations in the Balkans for their work, and also willingness to sign a statement. And finally, there is something from Worka. Please, Frane. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yes, I think we have a wonderful initiative and opportunity to open up the statement and the recommendations for a broader sign up. So let's do that.
Okay, regarding to Borka's message, Frane, I will call Frane after this meeting and talk about the dates, because Frane, your Congress is in the same time as our General Assembly. Oh my God, let's try to okay, we will talk. So just to conclude with one sentence, thank you very much for joining. Thank you for all your questions. It shows that you understand that we are one of you, you are one of us, and we are open for daily talks, help, support, and we really have to stick together and fight for those things which we are here for. It's free, independent journalism. Thank you very much, and stay in touch.
Yes, thank you all.
Thanks,
Wonderful
everyone.
to see you, at least virtually.
Thank you. Have a productive day, everyone. And thank you so much for joining and finding the time.